voy a presentar al doctor Sam Ho. El doctor Ho es director del Laboratorio de Histocompatibilidad y Enfermedades Infecciosas de Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network, una de las 55 organizaciones procuradoras de órganos que están distribuidas a lo largo de los Estados Unidos. A lo largo de su trayectoria, el Dr. Ho ha sido consultor para diversas instituciones vinculadas al ámbito de trasplante en los Estados Unidos. Actualmente es miembro de la Junta Directiva del Colegio Americano de Histocompatibilidad e Inmunogenética, ACHI, copresidente del Comité Examinador para Directores del Laboratorio de la misma organización y participa activamente en la Sociedad Americana de Histocompatibilidad e Inmunogenética, ASHI, como miembro del Comité de Asuntos Externos y del Comité Nacional de Asuntos Clínicos. El Dr. Ho cuenta con más de 60 publicaciones científicas y más de 130 resúmenes y presentaciones en congresos internacionales. Además, es profesor adjunto de medicina en la Facultad de Medicina de la Universidad de Michigan. Él realizó su licenciatura, maestría y doctorado en la Universidad de Baylor, en Waco, Texas, y completó su formación postdoctoral en inmunología del trasplante en la Facultad de Medicina de la Universidad de Michigan. Hoy tenemos el gusto de recibirlo con la charla Behind Every Match, el rol de los laboratorios de histocompatibilidad en la asignación de órganos en los Estados Unidos. Para nuestra comunidad, este es tema muy relevante, ya que, como todos sabemos, en nuestro país aún no contamos con un sistema nacional de asignación de órganos y confiamos en que la experiencia del doctor Sam Ho y su perspectiva nos aporten pues ideas valiosas acerca de cómo fortalecer y de cómo orientar la normativa y los procesos de asignación de órganos en nuestro país. Además de todo lo que he mencionado anteriormente, el doctor Sam Ho es un gran amigo y gran colaborador, un mentor, podría decir también, porque me ha apoyado en diversas tomas de decisiones. Sam, thank you so much for being with us. We truly, truly appreciate your time and your willingness to share your experience with us, with our community. It's a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay, well, thank you. I will share my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
We can see your screen. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for Cynthia for inviting me to share a little bit of my, our experience here in terms of, organ allocation and organ transplant donation, everything in the US. Let's see. So as Cynthia mentioned, I believe that I am the director at Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network. I have been here about 7 years now. And prior to this job, I was in the very similar setting in Michigan. So just a few slides in explaining, who we are. We are Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network, and we are a U.S. government federally designated nonprofit organization called the Organ Procurement Organization that we coordinate all the organ and tissue donations and recovery in the state of Illinois and also in Northwest Indiana. Here shown the map where we are. We are actually near Chicago. And this is our what we call donation surface area. So these are the counties and hospitals and places that we coordinate all the organ donation and recovery. Let's see. And again, this is where we are. We are in the beautiful Chicago, Illinois, and I believe Cynthia has spent a few years here. You probably don't remember the winter here. 3 weeks ago, it was Celsius wise. I think it was -20 Celsius or -30 Celsius. It was really, really, really cold about 3 weeks ago. But anyway, so we are in the Chicago metro area. And our donation surface area covers a total of 12.5 million populations. So we have a total of, I think, 150, 180 hospitals in our region. And we have a total of 10 transplant centers in our donation surface area with a total of 38 transplant programs. So as you can see here, we have transplant centers doing um, heart, lung, see, see, this pointer. We have heart, lung, liver, intestine, kidneys, and almost all of the centers are doing kidney transplant, pancreas transplant, and we have a couple programs that have VCA or vascularized composite allograft, including hand or uterus and that kind of transplants as well. So we are like a mini hospital. We have about 450 employees in our organization. We have donation coordinators. Most of them are nurses. We have people who pump organs. We have call center staff. We have surgeons. We have 3 surgeons in-house. All they do is to recover organs for transplant. Just as with any organization, we have finance, we have government relation, marketing, IT, and also, of course, we have the laboratory here. And as a matter of fact, we are one of the 15 OPOs out of 55, which I'll explain a little bit, with an in-house laboratories performing donor and recipient testing. So this is kind of the outline of my talk, just to kind of give you an overview of the structure and governance of the U.S. organ allocation system, and also we'll examine the function, very brief, the OPO, what do we do? We'll review, what is the performance and also current status of the deceased donor kidney allocation system in the U.S. And we'll touch on a little bit about um, our role as a HLA expert in the organ donation and transplantation. And I think the practice of virtual cross matching is kind of new to a lot of people outside of US. But so I'll touch on a little bit on what exactly is virtual cross matching and how it can help expedite organ allocation. So I think it will be helpful to kind of give it perspective on that we have come a long way in terms of organ transplantation in the U.S. So as some of you may remember, kidney transplantation has begun in 1954, so over 70 years ago, that Dr. Joe Murray performed the first kidney transplants between 2 identical siblings at Harvard. And then in the 60s, we have actually accomplished kidney and pancreas transplant, liver transplant, and also heart and pancreas transplant. Then in the 80s, the community has accomplished different thoracic transplants, including heart lung, single lung, double lung, intestine. And also in the 80s, they have done the split liver transplant, living donor transplant, and also living donor lung transplant. And in the 1999, single hand transplant has been accomplished at the University of Kentucky. And so it's been 26 years now. And I happened to visit the University of Kentucky, Louisville, actually, last year or the year before to inspect the laboratory. They actually celebrated 25th anniversary with this recipient. So his hand is still there, no rejection. Everything's been working great. That's really amazing. And then in the 2000s, and the community has attended and successfully attended partial phase transplant, and then also double hand transplant, and then later on a full face transplant. And then in the 2015, a pediatric double hand transplant was done in Philadelphia at the Children's Hospital. And then in the 2016, a uterus and also penile transplant had been accomplished at the Cleveland Clinic and also at the Brigham, I think it was at the Brigham Hospital in Boston. And then amazingly, 2017, the first live birth with transplanted uterus was, I think, born at Baylor, Dallas. And then few years ago, they attempted and successfully full face and double hand transplant. And then 2022, they did a partial heart transplant in a little infant that has some heart defect. And I think the children, the kid is still, alive and doing really, really well. And last but not least, we have a partial face and also whole eye transplant a few years ago that was accomplished. And as some of you may remember, about 4 years ago now, the first pig heart was used in a human at the University of Maryland. The heart, I think, lasted about 6 weeks, if I recall. It was, of course, the first genetically engineered pig heart transplant in human. And then a few years later, or 2 years ago, the first genetically modified pig kidney was transplanted in human. So the point here is that we have accomplished a lot in a very long time. It's been 70 years. And if you look at the donation rate and transplant rates, I would say US is actually has the, amongst the most successful organ transplantation system in the world. This is some data from 2024 that we have one of the highest organ transplant donation rates in the deceased donor donation rate in the world with nearly 17,000 organ donors accomplished. And then we have the second highest deceased donor donation rate in the world, uh, even though we have an opt-in system, meaning that donors have to sign up to the organ donor registry before they can become a donor. Whereas in the Europe, they actually do the opt-out system where they have to indicate that they don't want to be a donor so that they can be taken off the list. So it's a pretty okay, successful transplant system, I think. And then, as of about 4 years ago, over 1 million transplants have already been performed in the US. So a little bit more data, compared to Spain, we are at about 50 donors per million population. Spain has about 54. But if you look at the actual number of deceased organ donors, we have nearly 17,000 deceased donors in the US in 2024. And second place, so to speak, is China, and then followed by Brazil and Spain and whatnot. So again, having a system to be able to recover 17,000 donors is very complex. And I think, in my opinion, it still has one of the most effective organ donation and transplantation system in the world. So I looked up a little bit how is Mexico doing in terms of donation rate compared to the others. If you look at the number of deceased organ donors, and actually pretty decent. Out of the 91 countries that we have data on, Mexico actually ranked number 12 in terms of the number of deceased organ donors with 545 deceased donors in 2024. So that's a very decent. But then you look at the population, you guys have about 120, 130 million population. So the rate of the deceased organ donor donation, it's right at 4.2. So 4.2 donors per million population. So which rank kind of in the middle of the pack. So it's not too bad, but of course, there are rooms to grow. So this is a very busy slide just to show you how complex the organ donation and transplantation in the US is with the government oversight. So we have a total of, you look at every health related, of course, is under the health department. And there are three main branches, for example, here. At the FDA regulates more on the cells, tissue, and donations and transplantations, which we deal with as an OPO, but that's not beyond the focus of this talk. And CMS stands for Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services. They decide on the OPTN or organ procurement transplantation network policies. And then they're also responsible for OPO certifications. They're also responsible for the costs associated with transplant. And then this is HRSA, which stands for Health Resources and Services Administration, regulates most of the transplant system in the U.S. And under HRSA, there are three main branches, and this Bill Young Cell Transplantation Program is the branch that regulate bone marrow donation and transplantations. Okay, and then the OPTN, which is the most important regulator of the transplantation and donation system of the whole system. We have a total of, I think, 400 something members, which includes a total of 252 centers, transplant centers in the US, and then there are 55 OPOs in the country. And then in terms of HLA labs that perform testing for organ donors and recipients, there are 137 HLA labs in the country, and there are some other members as well. And under the CMS, of course, they have a branch that is called CLIA, which then regulate HLA laboratories in the US. And then they have what we call the deemed status. They basically designate ACHI and CAP to approve HLA laboratories. But UNOS stands for United Network for Organ Sharing, is probably the most well known to be the single contractor of the donation and transplantation system. But as some of you may have heard, it has become a question mark now because UNOS actually lost as a single contractor contract to the system. So what happened is that a few years ago there was a reform of the donation and transplantation system. So they call it the OPTN modernization. So they actually break the single contract into 12 different parts. As you can see here, there's governance is operated by a vendor, and then safety is by another vendor and whatnot. So still has some as a piece of the contract, which they are actually will be running the computer system for doing matching, for doing registering the patients and labeling and logistics and transportation and whatnot. So it's an interesting time for us in the country because there's a lot of unknown ahead of us. But that's why it's getting a bit more complex. So what is OPO? What do we do? So as I mentioned earlier, OPO is a nonprofit organization that coordinates all the donation, evaluation, and procurement of organ tissue and even eyes or corneas from deceased donor for transplantation, research, and education. So our status is designated by the U.S. government. In the U.S. law, it's written here, as you can see. And as I mentioned earlier, it's certified by CMS on a 4-year cycle based on 2 important metrics. One is the number of organ donors, and the other one is how many organs can we recover and get transplanted. So these are the 2 important metrics. So as I mentioned, there are 55 OPOs in the country, spread across the countries. And then each OPO provides service, as I mentioned earlier, to the donor hospital in our donation service area. As I mentioned, we cover most of Illinois in our donation service area. We have about 150, I think, hospitals that could potentially generate donors. And our status is designated by the government, by the CMS office. Now, our DSA, or donation service area, it's designated according to county, not state. So it's not like one state has one OPO due to historical reason. So as you can see here, this is not by state line. Many OPOs actually cover more than one state. For example, the OPO in Seattle covers a little bit of all of Montana and then a little bit of Idaho here. And some states have actually more than one OPO. Ohio, being a smaller state, they used to have 4 OPOs, but one of the OPOs merged with another OPO in Kentucky. So now Ohio actually, they still have 4 OPOs covering a rather, compared to other states, a rather smaller population. So based on historical reason. So there's a wide diversity, if you will, of OPOs. So again, we have 55 OPOs, but if you look at the surface area, we can, the smallest OPO, so to speak, can cover, about 1.4 million population in their donation surface area. I think it's Hawaii. I think they have the smallest OPO. And then the biggest OPO in terms of the coverage is Philadelphia. They have it's called Gift of Life Donor Program. They cover a nearly 20 million population with an average, in the country is about 6.2 million population. Geographically, the smallest OPO and biggest OPOs, as you can see here, it's a huge difference. Seattle OPO covers the biggest area with 800,000 square miles. That means all the donation activities in their surface area has to be coordinated by them. And number of deaths, that potential where the deceased donors are generated, ranging from 12,000 to 140,000, and number of donors also wide-ranging, ranging from about 70 to 700. So again, it's the diversity of different OPOs in terms of their size and coverage area. So some of the OPOs now is increasingly more that they actually have an in-house intensive care unit for transferring brain dead or potential donors to the facilities, and then to manage the donor more effectively until organ procurement can happen. So shown here is 3 different ICUs at Gift of Life, Michigan, the OPO in Michigan, and then CORE is the OPO in Pittsburgh, and then Mid America is the OPO in St. Louis. And then because of you have an in-house ICU, of course, you have to have a organ recovery suite. So these OPOs, as shown here, also have an in-house operating room for organ tissue and eye recovery. And as I mentioned earlier, out of 55 OPOs, there are about 15 OPOs that have an on-site or in-house laboratories. Some of them do HLA or histocompatibility. Some of them only do infectious disease testing. And in my lab here in Chicago, we do both histocompatibility and also infectious disease testing. And the reason having ACHI is an advantage of having an in-house laboratory for doing donor screening and recipient matching is that we can actually help expedite the organ placement and also organ allocation. So I don't think this is a new thing to everyone that the transplantation system is very complex with a lot of moving parts, a lot of experts, a lot of processes within. As you can see here, that it can broken down into multiple different steps, from patient listing all the way to how do you manage the long-term graft and patient survival. So wearing my laboratory director hat here, what is our role, as an actual lab director in deceased donor transplant? You can probably isolate it to a few areas where when a patient got listed at a transplant hospital, as a laboratory, of course, we help evaluate the recipient immune status, looking at their antibody, whether they have PRA, and whatnot, and then to get them listed on the national wait list. And then, of course, when there is a potential donor, whether it's a living donor or deceased donor, some of us would do deceased donor typing, some of them would do, living donor typing, and then go on to do cross matches. And then, of course, depending on whether it's a living donor or it's a deceased donor, and of course, at the time of organ offer, we perform cross matches, whether it's by CDC cross match or cytotoxicity cross match or by flow cross match, and which I'll touch on a little bit about virtual cross match down in the later part of my presentation here. And then finally, of course, we monitor patients for antibody development. So we would help test the patient for DSA donor-specific antibodies after transplant, and then we help maybe yearly or monthly or quarterly, whatever it is, at your center, that we help them to detect the presence of donor-specific antibodies. So transplantation system is complex, but so is the organ donation system. So this is a simplified kind of cycle of organ donation. A patient has to be, or a donor has to be diagnosed first to be, for example, most of the donors are brain dead donors, right? So they have to be diagnosed at a hospital. And then the hospital has to call the OPO, in Illinois, which is us, to refer a potential donor. We have to evaluate the donor. We have to evaluate with the nurses at the hospital. And then we have to dispatch nurses to the hospital to discuss with the family, to approach the family, discuss donation as an option. And then we have to do more medical evaluation. We have to do donor management, because these donors are not by any means healthy. So we have to manage their blood pressure. We have to manage their, a lot of different characteristics, down that path. And then when it comes to the lab, we have to do matching. We have to type the donor for HLA. We have to match to the right recipient, do cross matches to infectious disease and whatnot. Then we go on to surgical recovery. Sometimes we would put the organs on pump, kidney pumps being very common. And then we would coordinate transportation. We have to pack up the organ and then send it to the hospital such that the transplant hospital can transplant. And after that, it's not the end of it, because we have a department that would follow up with donor to make sure that that they are satisfied with the process and whatnot. So donation system is also very complex in addition to the transplant system. So U.S. organ allocation system is effective, but it's also very complex. So I'm going to skip all the before. It was equally complex before, but the current system was implemented about 5 years ago. It is based on geographic distance, meaning that we measure distance based on where the donor is compared to the transplant center. Okay, and then we designate a proximity point. So take my OPO as an example. That's in Chicago. So the circle, concentric circle, is at 250 nautical miles. So sounds like that this is the circle that we will be dealing with in terms of the donor hospital, and also which is shown here in the smaller dots, the smaller blue dots. The bigger blue dots indicate the transplant centers. Okay, so again, the 250 nautical miles is measured between where the donor is generated or originated to where the recipient transplant center is. So 250 nautical miles is this way, but in essence, because donors don't stay in one place, right? There's some hospital on the east, on the west, that can generate donors. In essence, we are dealing with a much bigger surface area in our donation surface area. So the effort compared to before, it's much greater. And if you look at the relationship building, in the old days, all the transplant center in our surface area only have to work with us, one of the OPOs. Okay, just one OPO. We used to have 10 centers in our region, and then we only have to work with those centers, and then they only will have to work with us. With the current allocation system, the average or the median number of the OPO that a transplant center has to work with is 9. Okay, it could be Gift of Hope, it could be the OPO in St. Louis, it could be anywhere. So it gets more and more complex. And then the number of hospital, which is considered local to a transplant center, increased from 41 now to almost 200. So again, it's the complexity of communication and relationship building and whatnot. So this just to show you that this is kind of on the graph on the right is the relationship between hospitals and transplant center and OPO. Now with the new system, it's much more complex. All these communication back and forth, and it's very complex. And this is kind of an overview allocation scheme based on different criteria. And it is actually based on how good the donor is. There's an index, which I'm not going to go deep into. It's called the Kidney Donor Profile Index. The higher the percentage is, the more suboptimal the donor would be. So if there's a young 18-year-old, car accident donor, the donor likely to have a KTPI of less than 20%. So these are the better donors. So it's based on how good the donor is, and also the recipient characteristics. Some of the criteria that we looked at, or the kidney allocation system is based on, is how sensitized the patient is, what's their CPRA, do they have ABDR mismatch, are they within the 250 nautical mile concentric circle, have they been a prior living donor, and that kind of thing. Okay. And then also on top of that, there's also within each categories, there's also a kidney allocation score. And as you can see here, I'm not going to go deep into, but actually it rely on a lot of whether the donor and recipient have zero ABDR mismatch, and what their age is. If are they a prior living donor? If they are, they will get 4 more points. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the concentric circle would provide a proximity point. So the closer that a recipient transplant center close to the donor hospital, they get more points, but up to 2 points. So, and then once you're outside of the 250 nautical miles, then the point restart again, starting at 4 points. So again, it's very convoluted, very complex allocation system to ensure that the organs are used in a equitable manner. So this is just to show you a example here. So say there's a 58-year-old Caucasian male, blood type A, and this patient had a head trauma and became brain dead. And then it's a non-MVA, non-motor vehicle accident blunt injury trauma. So based on KDPI, so it's 68%. So it's like not so good, but it's decent. It's okay, the donor. Oh, and this is the HLA typing here, okay? So this is what a typical match run looks like. It's, as on the left side here, all these four letter codes indicates the recipient center. So the first patient here on the list is a Washington State patient. The second patient is in Illinois. It's a Rush University Hospital patient here. And then, number 7, number 8 is Michigan and Minnesota. Number 9 is Ohio. So again, you can see how the match run, it pulls a lot of patients from different states. And mind you, there are 155 pages that we have to deal with, and so as an OPO to try to allocate organs from this, especially kidneys in this case, in this recipient. So from this donor. So it's very, very complex. And as you can see here, there's a lot of refusal codes, due to various reasons. But finally, we were able to, in this case, place the left kidney with an Ohio patient. Now, once they accepted it, of course, we have to recover the organs. We have to pack up the organs. They might ask for perfusion. We have to arrange transportation to send it to Ohio, which is by car, it would be about, depending on where in Ohio, it will be about 5 hours, 6 hours of distance, at least by car. So this is the second page. Again, it pulls more patients from New York, from North Carolina, from all different states. So again, the point here is like it's a very complex allocation, from donor to donor. So as I mentioned, organ allocation system is complicated in the US, but because of the new system, it has become increasingly inefficient, in my opinion. So they actually published a report. Again, the current allocation system was implemented in 2021, and they published a 2-year report, post-implementation report, to share with the community the performance of this allocation. So I'll pull a few things that are applicable to this audience here. So because of complication, so the offer per acceptance increased by a lot, meaning that we have to, for every available kidney, we have to make currently 445 offers before we can find one acceptance. So again, now this is not by phone, of course, by electronic, but as you can see, because of the change, it's 445 offers to get one acceptance. So the effort itself is increased, or it becomes very inefficient now. And then what about the median sequence number of patients when they accepted? Meaning that, before, on average, we get to number 9, we can find a recipient. Now it's number 18. Okay, this is of course a median number. Some cases, as you can see here, it goes all the way to the bottom of the list, which is, maximum would be like 33,000. So this patient was probably just listed yesterday. And then now you have a suboptimal organs that no one wanted. And then the surgeon decided, okay, let's put this in the patient, right? So again, median went up from 9 to number 18 now. So the case time, as an OPO, we focus on the case time where, from the first offer. So when do we make the first offer to a transplant center, all the way to cross clamp in the operating room, right? So it increased by 3 hours. So meaning that it takes longer, as shown previously, takes longer to find an offer so that we can go into the operating room and do the recovery. And if we look at our own data at Gift of Hope, from the time we talk to the family, they say yes, they sign the paperwork, all the way to organ recovery and cross-clamping. As you can see here, over the years, the time itself it takes has increased, quite significantly. In the end of 2025 or so, our average is about 63 hours. So that means from the time we talk to family to the time that in the operating room, it's like almost 2.5 days. So there are a lot of effort put into managing donor, finding the right recipient. And as I was told earlier, this year, our case time in 2026 has increased to about 70, 80, 72 hours. So 3 days. So it takes a lot of effort to find the right recipient. So because of the geographic-based distribution, the median distance travel increased significantly. So before, it was on average, well, median 71 miles to get to the recipient. Now it's 120 miles. So time takes longer, transportations, cost, and everything increase. And as you can see here, the maximum, some of the organs has to travel 4,000 miles. It probably from, I don't know, from Hawaii to Boston, or from Alaska to Miami. So again, there are a lot of distance that a kidney has to travel before it gets transplanted. Because of that, as we can imagine, the co-ischemic time increased quite a bit, by about 13%, because now we have to pack it in, as we can imagine, we have to put in box, iced, and then it takes longer to get to the right place. Because of that, the co-ischemic time increase, the incidence of delayed graft function also increased by about 4% as anticipated. Because of all these inefficiency, the kidney discards also increased dramatically. So we recover the organs, sitting in a box, try to find a recipient, or sitting on a pump, try to find the right recipient. After 2, 3, 4 days, we could not find anyone. We have to discard the kidney. So it's a pity for all of us, where this is 20 now currently is about 26%. So 1 in 4 kidneys that we recover would have to be discarded, put in the trash. That's a shame. That's a shame for this system, unfortunately. And if you look at the higher KDPI, meaning these are the older donors or donors with comorbidities, 71% kidneys are discarded. That's really a shame. 7 out of 10 kidneys are being put in trash. As OPO, we try so hard to recover. No one wanted it, okay, because of the cold time, because of a lot of inefficiency embedded in the system. So this is another graph showing that over time in the last 10 years, across all OPO, the organ discard rate, not only kidney, organ discard rate has increased steadily, okay? If you focus on the bigger OPO with more than 500 donors, the organ discard rate has reached as high as 35%. 1 in 3 organs got discarded. You look at kidney discard rate, you look at the arrow here, some of the kidneys at one point, 40% of them got discarded just within one OPO. So again, just to show you that, yes, it's a high volume, in the US, recovering organs, doing transplant, but it's becoming more difficult for OPOs to find the right recipient such that the organ can be transplanted. Cost. Some of you might be interested in the cost. When I started in 2008, 2006 or so, the median kidney cost about $30,000. This is the data that I pulled from last year. This is the x-axis here is all the different OPOs. So it ranged anywhere from $38,000 to as high as $80,000 per kidney. So this is what we bill if I allocate an organ to your center, and about 30 days later, you get a bill of $80,000 US dollars. So again, because of all these logistical challenges, time spent in the ICU, operating costs, and whatnot, it has increased quite dramatically. So the last part of my talk, I want to kind of focus on, what we do, as an HLA personnel or expert. What is our role in the organ donation, allocation, and transplantation? So this is what we do in the lab. We do blood typing. We do donor and recipient blood typing. We also do donor blood group A subtyping. This is to comply with the regulations that some of the donors with A2 or A2B can actually go to B recipient. And because of that, we also have to do, some of these laboratories would have to do a recipient anti-A titer testing as well on the recipient to facilitate that. From the HLA side, we do genotyping as expected on donors and recipients. We do antibody screening and identification on recipients. And depending on where, some of us do cross matches using CDC, cytotoxicity cross match, or flow cross match, and as I will share in a minute, that we do virtual cross matches also. So in my lab, we also do infectious disease donor screening, mostly on the hepatitis B virus antigen, surface antigen, antibody, hepatitis C, HIV. We do some parasite testing as well for toxoplasmosis, syphilis, CMV, EBV. On some donors, we perform HTLV, Chagas, and also strongyloides testing as well. And then on the molecular side, we also do NAT testing, nucleic acid testing on Hep B, HBV, HCV, West Nile virus, and of course, because of the COVID and pandemic, we started doing SARS-CoV-2 testing since the pandemic started on all potential deceased donors. And some of the laboratories would also do some of the what we call point of care testing, including blood gases during organ recovery, and we would do chemistry, electrolytes, as you can see here, coagulation, hematology, urinalysis, depending on where you are. This is some of the pictures in one of my laboratories in St. Louis. They do a lot of chemistry testing on organ donors because they have an in-house operating room. And depending on where you are, some of the labs will also do microbiology testing. This is some of the pictures shown here. It's another lab in Pittsburgh. They do blood, urine on organ perfusate culture, and some of them do organ donor biopsies via frozen or permanent sections. And then in the Pittsburgh lab, the laboratory technologists actually pump kidneys. They put the kidneys on pump. That's just how it is. But they have been trained to put kidneys on pump. So how can actually a lab help expedite organ allocation? So I'm not going to go too deep into it. As I mentioned, the current kidney allocation system was implemented in March of 2021. Before that, we were doing about 20 cross matches set up per week. Okay. After the kidney allocation system changed 5 years ago, we have gone up to 40 cross match set up per week. So that's about 6 cross matches per day. And currently, this was some data from a few months ago, we were doing 42 cross matches per week. So every week, we would cross match 151 patient sera. So it's a lot of volume that we have to deal with. Okay, so it's a lot of work, and we use flow cytometry for cross match, and average turnaround time is about 6 hours. So you can do the math: 42 times 6 hours, so 240 hours every week we're doing cross matches. Okay, so I want to bring a concept. I don't know how common this is in Mexico, but in the U.S. there are still some centers that they are still hang on to the physical cross match, but a lot of centers now are doing virtual cross matches. Now, virtual cross match, what does it mean? It's a simple approach to assess donor recipient immunological compatibility based on the data what we have. For example, HLA typing of the donor and then antibody information from the recipient without actually doing the physical cross match. Not CDC, not flow cross match. It's more like in blood banking, your electronic cross match. It's a recipient is this, donor is this, therefore it's compatible, right? So the outcome can be used to predicting physical cross-match outcome, which I'll show you in a minute. And we can actually use that quite successfully and also reliably to predict the immunological risk for acute for antibody-mediated rejection. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, you require complete donor typing. You need the complete recipient and actually antibody profile, and then typically we would use the solid phase Luminex solid phase single antigen beads for that testing, and we will determine if pre-existing DSA is present in the recipient. If it's present, can you manage it? Can you cross it? So there are a lot of things that can be done without having to do the actual test. So before I go into that, what is the advantage? Okay, again, you don't have to do a test. Everything is electronic, right? So you can do it in a computer. If you have the donor information and also you have the recipient antibody profile, it simplifies the allocation logistics. We don't have to ship, as an OPO, we don't have to ship donor cells to a transplant center doing that kind of test. Okay, it takes maybe 30 minutes. In most cases, it takes 10 minutes to, it's compatible. So you guys can just go, right? You don't have to do a test, right? It preserves all the resources in a laboratory. And of course, because of the turnaround time being shortened so much, we would predict that the co-ischemic time, also the incidence of delayed graft function would be reduced and finally improve transplant outcome. So this is just some concept of I'll give you a few examples here. So you have a donor typing on the left side. You have recipient candidate number one is a 62% CPRA, meaning that it's okay, fairly sensitized. These are the strong antibodies profile, moderate, weak antibody. So if you compare the recipient antibody profile to the donor, you don't see any DSA. So therefore, this is a negative virtual cross match. Okay, the rejection risk, immediate or acute antibody mediated rejection risk, it's low to even none. So the recommendation is that, okay, proceed to transplant. Okay, pretty straightforward. Second case here. So same donor, but now you have some weak antibody, okay? B8C7. So you would report, sometimes we would report as, okay, this is a weak positive, virtual cross match. So what's the rejection risk here? Yeah, weak antibody to class 1, maybe moderate to low. So our recommendation is like, okay, you can proceed. If the donor is good, maybe you should just go. If the donor is not good, maybe you have to rethink that, do you want to use a suboptimal kidney crossing DSA, right? So there are a lot of clinical criteria that the surgeon have to think of. If they decided to cross, maybe maybe we should do a DSA monitoring, maybe at the beginning of the first week or second week, for detection of memory response and treat if the antibody rebound. Third case, same donor. Now you have a lot of antibodies, strong antibodies. So this is a positive or strong positive cross match. What is the rejection risk, AMR risk? It's high because you're crossing a lot of strong antibodies, right? Or moderate antibodies. So the recommendation here is like, okay, so if you can avoid, all right? So if you decided to proceed as a surgeon, then maybe you want to desensitize the patient upfront, and also monitor the patient much earlier for early antibody-mediated response, right? So this is how virtual cross-match works. So we just need to know the patient's antibody history and profile compared to donor typing, okay? So lastly, I'm just going to share very quickly with you some experience using mostly virtual cross-match and an OPO lab serving multiple transplant centers. So I am also the consulting lab director at New Jersey Organs and Tissue Sharing Network. It's next to New York, so there are a lot of population there. So it's in terms of the OPO, they serve about 7 million population. These are all the demographics of the OPO. There are a total of 6 transplant centers in the area. And 2 of the centers, they actually are fairly high volume transplant center in the country. So in 2024, St. Barnabas Medical Center here, they ranked number 5 in disease out of 250 or so transplant centers in terms of the deceased donor transplant volume. Hackensack ranked number 6. So just these 2 programs together, they do about 700 kidneys a year. So that's quite high. And in terms of the donation surface area, in New Jersey, there are roughly 2,500 patients on the waiting list. And in the last 2 years, 2023, 2024, they generate roughly about 250 to 300 donors per year. So in the last 3 years, we have switched the algorithm where, in 2023, for example, it's shown here, 40% of the transplant were done using virtual cross-match. But we have changed a few things. We got comfortable with the antibody testing and everything and typing, reliability and whatnot. So in 2025, over half or more than half of the patients, 2/3 of the patients are transplanted based only on virtual cross-match, no physical cross-match, okay? So only a handful of patients, maybe now in this case, 1 in 4 patients are relying on only physical cross-match. And again, this is showing you the concordance between physical cross-match and virtual cross-match, that it's fairly high, as you can see here, a good sensitivity and then a superb specificities here. And we actually also went back and studied the first 33 months of data, right? Comparing what is the reliability or the accuracy of virtual cross-match in predicting flow cross-match based on 1,000 tests that we have done. Overall concordance, as I show you, is 91%. This is how it shows. So based on based on this numbers, is a fairly high predictive value here, predicting the accuracy of physical cross-match. And how do the centers do, in the based on looking at 1 year short-term outcome? It's fairly high. I mean, you look at the four kidney centers here, they have over 90% of 1 year kidney survival. And as a matter of fact, these two centers, as I mentioned here, they get fairly aggressive. Number 6 and number 5 here, their 1 year kidney survival is at 94%. So virtual cross match, it's actually quite effective for these centers here. What about 3 year medium survival? Here you look at the hazard ratio based on their performance, looking at the transplant number. So not going into the details here, they have comparable 3 year medium-term graft outcome or clinical outcome based only on virtual cross-match. Again, no physical cross-match done on most of these patients. So in summary, I hope that I've shared a few things about the US organ allocation system. And as I mentioned, is quite effective based on the numbers, but because of the changes that we have been having in the last few years, in my opinion, it has become increasingly inefficient. So I hope that I touch on a little bit that the critical role of HLA laboratories in facilitating organ donation and also transplantation. And hopefully the last part will show you that if you have good antibody algorithm, you have good virtual cross-match, and actually it can help simplify organ allocation and also placement and also transplantation. Again, it can actually help minimize the co-ischemic time, help reduce the incidence of delayed graft function, and also hopefully we can help more patients and improve transplant outcome. So with that, thank you very much for having me again, Cynthia. So is there any question that I can help answer?
Sam, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I think it's a very good view about how the organ allocation system in the US is working. And thank you so much for your insight about how those last changes in the system have impact in the way the OPOs, laboratories like yours, are working right now. I think that gives us a wonderful insight about which pathways we should follow, right? Which mistakes we shouldn't repeat probably in our future about how to organize all this system for our country. So thank you so much. I have a lot of questions. Some of them you have already answered them during your presentation. I have here a few questions. I do believe that some of them were also answered, but some of the question is in the best interest, es en el mejor interés de los receptores debido a la calidad de los órganos continuar out of sequence allocation, fuera de la secuencia de asignación. I don't know if you can read it. Sam, I'm going to repeat it. Is in the best interest of the recipient due to the quality of the organ to continue without of the sequence allocation. Probably it's a good opportunity to explain what's the sequence, what's the ranking allocation. Yeah.
Ah, luckily, I keep a few slides here.
Awesome.
Let's see. I
Because
present.
that's very important. I think that's
Yeah. This is a hot topic now. As you can see, because of the complexity, because of the number
yeah.
of phone calls we have to make, right? Depending on the case, where the case is. And in the, say a year ago, 2 years ago, we actually have to
Mhm.
jump the list, if you will. I have a kidney here sitting on a box for 30 hours now. The next few hours becomes very important. Do I still want to follow the list to all the way to 155 pages of recipient to find the right recipient? Or now the kidney is in somewhere, can I just, in a way, jump the system? All right. So it becomes a hot topic now. And long story short, that this is where the it shows that, if you follow the list, you go and go and go, all right? That there are tens of thousands of patients on the kidney wait list, right? So if you follow the list, then the effort it takes is much more inefficient. And it forces the OPO in collaboration with the transplant centers, in some cases, to jump the list, right? Because of code time, because of logistical challenges and whatnot. But we have been requested or asked by the government to stop doing that because it is not equitable in that sense, right? Some of the data here, I'll show you this slide here. Because of the, like you look at all the organs, prior to 2020, there was not really sequence, allocation out of sequence here. But then if you look at the last few years, right, it dramatically increased. And you look at the bigger OPO here, right? Some of them actually have to jump 40% of the donor because because if you're in Alaska, right? So it's on the western side of the country, and you ship a kidney all the way to Miami, and you cannot find a home for that kidney. It's a difference between either the kidney going to the trash, or you jump the list, find the right, maybe older recipient to do that kidney. So again, if the inefficiency somehow force the OPO and transplant center to adapt to that kind of thing. But then a few months ago, I think about a year ago, the government's like, okay, stop doing this. This is not equitable. You cannot bypass. You have to follow the list. So again, because of that, the discard went back up again.
Got it. Awesome. This is wonderful data, by the way. This is wonderful information. Gonzalo Montero, he's asking, él pregunta, what's the donor organ usage in donor kidney with KDPI lower than 70%? ¿Cuál es la tasa de uso de donadores con un KDPI por abajo del 70%?
I think again, as I shown there, the kidney donors are divided into 4 buckets, right? The
Yeah.
really good one, and then the really bad one, if you will, and then the middle of the pack. 70%, I would say, it as the KDPI decrease, the usage goes up. If you have a discard, from a donor at 0 to 20%, that's really rare, right? So again, it's not easy. It's not hard to find a home for a low KDPI donor. So I would say it just follow that trend. The higher the KDPI, the more discard. The lower the KDPI, the less discard. So I don't have the data with me, but again, I think it's easily you can find it in the OPTN website.
Sam, we have only a couple of minutes. I want to ask you something a very, very basic question that I think is gonna be very helpful for us in our context. You present us this circuit about how, how the process is completed during a transplantation. And you described something between the medical evaluation and the matching run, right? And after that, the recovery of the organs occurs. Okay, so could you explain us, please, in which step you receive the donor sample for typing, so you can perform the match run? At what point that happens?
Let's see
¿En qué
here.
punto del proceso de asignación de órganos, cuando hay una oferta, en qué punto el laboratorio recibe la muestra del donador para realizar una asignación de órganos, lo que ellos conocen como el match run? ¿En qué punto ocurre esto, esta diapositiva?
Okay. Do you still see my screen? No, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right.
We can
So
see it.
so so this step, every OPO is slightly different. Let's just say my OPO in Chicago now. Donor sample, we start drawing donor sample after we discuss with the family, and then they consent for donation.
Exactly.
This is where it starts, and then sorry.
That's critical for us, Sam,
Yeah.
because we are doing this far away in the process. Sometimes after the organ recovery happens.
Some after.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. Let's see. Somehow my slide's stuck here. Oh, here. So depending on again, did I lose the sharing?
Yeah, you lose. Yeah, you are not sharing anymore.
Just to, I know we are out of time. So depending again, it starts about the family consented for donation. And in the some of the OPOs, depending on the state law, sometimes the hospital would allow the OPO to draw blood even before talking to family for the purpose of evaluation of organ donation. So it will be somewhere around this step there, referral. So if the hospital made a referral, the OPO personnel can go into the hospital, look at the chart, draw blood at that point. So that means the laboratory has more time to do infectious disease testing, to do matching, to prepare for cross matches and whatnot. Again, depending on the state rules.
Got it. Awesome.
Uh,
Sam, is 8:02 p.m. I want to thank you for all this wonderful presentation. I think it's a beautiful insight in how this system works, how beautiful it works. I know you have a lot of complaints. You were very clear about it. We are taking notes about. Now I'm gonna have nightmares just remembering how many virtual cross match I had to do at nights during my training. But thank you so much. And hopefully, I can see you in Merida this year in our National Transplant Congress. So, willing to see you there.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Cynthia.
so much. We
All right.
appreciate it. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Solo, bye. Unos anuncios finales. Muchas gracias a todos los que nos acompañaron el día de hoy. Recordarles que a partir de ahora intentaremos que todas nuestras sesiones mensuales les puedan otorgar al menos un crédito para el proceso de recertificación en nefrología y en cirugía general para todos aquellos que atiendan las sesiones mensuales. Con un tiempo en línea de más del 80% de la duración de la sesión, van a recibir de forma automática sus constancias vía correo electrónico. Hubieron muchas preguntas que no nos dio tiempo de contestar, pero les agradecemos mucho su asistencia y los esperamos el próximo mes en nuestra próxima sesión. Muchas gracias a todos. Recuerden que la sesión estará disponible on demand en la página de la Sociedad Mexicana de Trasplantes. Buenas noches. Muchas gracias.